Hello there. Welcome back to TerraFirmaCraft HardRock. I hope you're having a wonderful day. We're just grinding down a bit more tetrahedrite to make some more copper so we can make some bronze today. But as I'm sitting here working away, I heard our beer finished up. We now have 10 buckets of beer, and it is currently aging into aged beer, which, if we check quickly, doesn't say here, but you can drink aged beer and get a buff. If you give me a second, I'll figure out which one. All right. I'll just put this up on screen, but aged beer gives you the potion effect absorption 2, which effectively gives you extra hearts. But we do not want aged beer. So we're going to open the barrel. We're going to grab our bucket, and we want 16 fruit. So we're taking all these cherries while they're still good, because they won't be for long. And we're going to transfer some of this beer over into this barrel, because we're going to seal the fruit in this barrel. You need 4 fruit per bucket. 16 ounces is 32 fruit. 32 divided by 4, 8. We can seal these, and this will turn into vinegar, and this will take 8 hours. And once we have vinegar, we can use it to make brine, which we need for preserving food, and we can also use it to pickle food and store the food in the vinegar. I made another bucket here. We need to go get salt water to make brine, and you could find halite, crush it down into salt, and then boil it, soak it in water. Or the reason I like living by oceans is you walk out into the ocean and you click the barrel to get the salt water. We do have sharks in this mod pack, so we don't want to travel too far into the water, but I do need it to switch the biome over to ocean. I'm not seeing it switch to ocean. Oh, there we go. The tooltip says salt water. So now we have a barrel of salt water. Oh, okay. So sometimes it's salt water right up to the shore. Sometimes there's a ring of fresh water next to salt water. In this case, don't actually have to worry about that. So now we have a barrel of salt water. So once the vinegar is done, we can combine the vinegar with the salt water here to turn it into brine. And I can show you how to preserve food. Or at least preserve food better. All right, vinegar's done. So what we do now is we have to take 1 bucket of the salt water out, and we really can't use it for anything, so I'm just gonna dump it. At least for now. We can, we've got plenty of salt water right over there, so it doesn't matter too much. Then we take 1 bucket of vinegar out, and we combine it with the salt water, and that turns it into brine. And now with brine, let's grab, let's do the cabbage. Make some sauerkraut. Toss that in here and seal it, and it's going to start brining. It's good for 16 days right now, and in 4 hours, it will be brined cabbage, which will extend the shelf life. Well, that's happening. We're just going to wash a bit more ore, but now I don't remember if I pointed this out last episode. We have the 2 sluices right next to each other. If we toss the dust to be right there, so it's kind of touching both sluices, they both pick up the dust. And so you have them next to each other. If you set it up so that it's about in between the 2, you can feed multiple sluices from 1 pile. And this way you don't have to figure out where you have to toss the pile to feed that one and to feed this one without them combining. If it's in between, it'll feed both. Our cabbage is done, and it does consume some of the brine, but now it is brined, and it's good for 20 days. If we now toss this in here, it will pickle. It was 16 days, and after brining it, it's up to 20 days. Now we're pickling it. Once it's done pickling, it should be somewhere close to 30 days, I think, outside the barrel, but in the barrel, it will have a much longer shelf life. And I got asked the other day if drinking beer will fill your water needs. So let's find out. Yes, it does. Doesn't fill it as much as drinking the boiled water, since the boiled water looks like boiled water will completely refill your thirst bar, no matter how low it is. But yes, you can drink beer and it meets your water need. All right, we were at 20 days before. Preserved in the vinegar, the cabbage is good for a month and 18 days, so that's 58 days. Outside, it's good for 40 days. So we can store it in the vinegar. We could take it out of the vinegar, toss it in here, and now it's good for 2 months and 21 days. That's how you preserve food even longer. You can do it with fruit. You cannot do it with grains. You can do it with vegetables. You can do it with meat. Meat you can also smoke. The different preservation methods stack. So if you have to brine the meat first, then I think you can smoke it, and then you can pickle it, and then preserve it in vinegar. And that will extend the life of the meat with each subsequent preservation method. I cut this for time last week, but when I was out exploring looking for more clay, I came across quite a few sheep. So I was going to collect said sheep and start bringing them home. And while gathering up the sheep, I got a little too close to some wolves, who proceeded to chase me. Well, I managed to escape the wolves because about halfway through chasing me, they decide humans a little too stringy, I'd rather go for the rack of lamb. Hence, the sheep behind me. When they killed this sheep, it dropped a bladder, which we need to make a water flask, both the leather and the iron flask, which will hold 5 drinks of water. The iron flask will hold 2 buckets of water. 5 drinks is half a bucket. Once we get some leather, we're going to be making a leather flask because it's much better water storage than the jug that we have, because, well, the jug only holds 1 drink or 100 millibuckets, and the jug has a chance to break. I think it's 2% per use. I've been lucky so far. Of course, now that I say that, I'm knocking on the wood of my desk because you know it's going to break the next time I try drinking from it. But yeah, so we need leather, and then we'll make the water flask, and the water flasks can be repaired because they do have a durability. It also dropped 7 rennet, and this is what we need to make milk curds, well, curdled milk, and then milk curds. We're going to be using this in the near future once we have a little more goat's milk. It also dropped 2 bits of wool. Now, in TerraFirmaCraft, normally when you kill a sheep or any woolly animal, which includes alpacas and I believe muskox, it will drop a woolly hide, a sheepskin hide, which when you scrape it will give you wool and a hide. When the wolves killed this sheep, it just dropped the wool. So I took the wool and I made a spindle. Spindle is made by making a spindle head, which is a clay mold recipe, which you then have to fire. And what you do is you put the spindle in your crafting grid along with the wool, and it turns into wool yarn. This wool yarn we can now make using a loom into wool cloth. And that's what this is. This is a loom. Recipe is pretty easy, 7 lumber and 1 stick. And you can combine multiple things on the loom. We have the wool yarn, but you can also do string and jute fibers. We haven't processed our jute down into fibers yet, but we could do that. The way the loom works is you have to click the string or the yarn or the fibers on. And as you see, it's got a weaving progress. We have to load this up. For silk, it takes 24 string. For yarn, it takes 16, and for jute fibers, I believe it's 8. And then once you have the loom full, you have to hold down your right click, and you will cycle through the loom, slowly weaving the string together. I have to do this for it to process through all 24 cycles, and then we will get silk cloth. Or if you're doing wool, you'll get the wool cloth, and if you're doing jute, you'll get burlap cloth. And there we go. Now we got silk cloth. That's how you make things like, well, that's how you're going to make silk cloth to make things like the create sails. Silk cloth, burlap cloth, wool cloth. So yeah, we're going to need those to make create sails in the future. Wool rolls look like we can make them from wool blocks. You make wool blocks by combining 4 wool to get 8 wool blocks. So actually, converting the wool blocks, wool cloth into wool blocks, which gives you 8 wool, and then cutting them on a sewing table will give you 4 rolls. It's much more efficient to do it that way to make sails. So that's a little tip. So you get 32 sails for what would normally cost you 4 sails. Anyway, with the silk cloth, we can make cheesecloth, which we're going to need to make milk curds. We can make a chisel and bits bag, a sleeping bag, which will allow us to sleep through the night. Also, I believe they are used for the traveler's backpack. Yup. But we're also going to need them to make ourselves some silk clothing. Silk clothing will keep you cool in the summer, whereas wool will keep you warm during the winter. So we might want to try to save up and make some silk clothing before too long, just to help keep us cool. Oh, wow, we got super lucky. So we have 3 queens, and it must have happened yesterday. If you notice now, we have a 1 in 7 chance of getting a new queen in our hive. This hive has no queens. So what we can do, it's nighttime, is pull this queen out and put it in this one here. Now we have a 1 in 28 chance that a new queen will generate in this hive. I mentioned before, bees have abilities. This one here has a production of 1 and a natural restoration of 1. That means it will generate flowers. This one has a hardiness of 2 and a calmness of 1. The hardiness means that it will be able to produce honey at colder temperatures. Calmness will be calmer. It's less likely to sting you if you pull it out during the day. You can avoid the need of calmness by always removing the frames at night. This one has hardiness of 3, calmness of 3. We don't really want calmness. So what we're going to do is we're going to let more bees generate, and we're going to try to breed the queens by removing queens that have traits that we don't want. We want production. Natural restoration is not bad, but it's not really necessary. So this bee will probably go into a special hive of her own where I can grow flowers around that hive specifically and try to breed up a better natural restoration so she can generate me flowers without me having to explore for them. We do want hardiness. We want productivity. We don't need calmness. Mutation helps spread abilities, but once you're maxed out, it's kind of worthless. So I want to try to not breed mutation into this set. We could do fertility, which will increase the fertility of the queens, and therefore better chance of producing new queens. And whichever one it is that gives you fertilizer or automatically fertilizes your crops, we're going to want that. We're going to leave this, and hopefully in the next day or so we will have a few more queens, and then I can scrape one of the frames for you to show you how that works, and then we can start on actual leather working, which means I'm going to want to go get some hides. But that means that we are very close to leather, which means we'll be able to make a bellows soon. And once we have a bellows, we don't need a pit kiln anymore because we could fire all of our clay items in our forge. All right, so now that I'm all excited and happy about having bees and finally being able to start on leather working and the bloomery and all that fun stuff, we actually need to see about making tools and also getting started with create, because create is going to be a handful, especially with pollution. Oh man, as I was checking them, new bees arrived. Okay, so we have hardiness 1, calmness 1, hardiness 2, productivity 1, natural restoration 1, and nothing. So we're going to scrape that height, that frame in a moment. Up here we have calmness 3 and hardiness 3. Again, we don't really want the calmness. Calmness 3, hardiness 1, crop affinity. That's the one that gives crops, fertilizes crops. We want that. And this is calmness and crop affinity 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another beehive. Of course, I'm going to stick these 2 crop affinity ones in that one, and we're not really going to worry about it. They will constantly fertilizing our crops. That's what they're going to do. But this one here, it's got nothing in it, or it's got no traits. So we grab our knife. Now we could either pull it out, but it's now daytime. The bees will get angry at us. You can see that they are these particle effects. We right click on the frame. Does that hurt the bee? Yes, the queen is now dead. But we now have the beeswax we need, which means we can make some treated lumber. And because we are getting ready to actually make leather, I went out to find ourselves some new wood types because, well, the wood we have around us, we have white cedar, looks very nice, useless for making leather. Rosewood, same deal, and ash. So I found some chestnut trees all the way over here. It's about a 2-day trip. 1 day there, 1 day back. What we can do now with these chestnut logs is if we soak them in a barrel of water, 1 log to 1 barrel will give us tannin. We need a tannin, of course, to soak our hides in, to tan the hides into leather. So we need chestnut logs. Other options include birch logs, oak logs, sequoia logs. I'm sure there's another one I'm forgetting, but not all logs can be used to make tannin, so make sure before you start making leather, you get the logs you need. First, let's make the treated lumber. So we need this in order to make the treated greenhouse if we want to go for a tier 1 greenhouse. There's almost no point in making a tier 1 greenhouse unless you're living someplace where it's absolutely always cold and there's almost no grow season. With the treated greenhouse, you can start growing crops even in the winter. Of course, if you're living in that sort of cold climate, getting your hands on beeswax is going to be near impossible. So, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? We need to make a mixing bowl. We need glue. To make glue, we need quicklime. Sorry, not quicklime. Lime water. That's flux in water. And bone meal. Bone meal we get from grinding bones down in the quarn. We can get it from cutting food on a cutting board, grinding bones in a millstone, or the create crushing wheel, and eventually the immersive engineering crusher, which is the most efficient method. So I'm going to go. Let's. I need more lumber. I need to make at least 2 more barrels. I need a barrel specifically for quicklime, or not quicklime. I keep saying it wrong. Lime water. We're going to need a lime water barrel, and then we're going to need a barrel to make tannin in. And again, you can completely fill up the barrel just by walking to a water source and right-clicking it. We are overburdened. We cannot move. We can stick 1 barrel on our backpack slot and move. You can also use the, what's this called? The offhand slot from Vanilla, or the utility slots from the inventory mod. This is kind of cheaty because it doesn't take into account that you're actually carrying something that you're not supposed to be carrying, or you're carrying multiple something. So I'm not going to do that. You can do it. It's just, I feel like it's cheating, so I'm not going to do it. All right, so we're going to need 10 chestnut logs that we can soak in here. That'll turn into tannin. And then in this one, we're going to turn it into lime water. I'm going to need, I think it's 2 flux per bucket. Yes, so I need 20 flux, which is almost all the flux we have, but we have plenty of dolomite that we can turn into dolomite that we can turn into flux. So we have that. Let's grab a bone. Oh, I picked up some cherry saplings while I was out, and I picked up chestnut seeds so I can grow my own chestnut trees. Bones into the quarn, just like everything else. Spin the grind wheel, the handstone twice, and we have plenty of bone meal. You can use bone meal as a fertilizer. You see it's got phosphorus 10%. That means if I applied it to a farm plot, doesn't really matter, the phosphorus went up by 10%. Now, beets. What do beets need? Beets take potassium. So if you put potassium in, the phosphorus will actually go up as the potassium goes down, and so will the nitrogen. But let's run over here. We toss those in there, seal it up, and in 8 hours we'll have glue. And then we can make our mixing bowl and get started on the next steps of making leather. So like I said, once we have leather, we can make a bellows, which will allow us to work the forge at its max temperature. It will of course make us hotter since we'll be standing next to the forge, but well, one thing at a time. So we're going to make 4 ingots of bronze. We're going to melt it into the vessel here to alloy it, just like what we did to make the bismuth bronze for the hammer. And then we're going to make a few tools. I want to make a new axe, since ours is getting a little worn down. I'm going to want to make some tool rods so we can make some hooks. Both a fishing hook, but also a metal hook, which we can use then to hang our sheep up to then butcher it to get meat. So that's going to be 2 of the ingots I make. I should probably make a bronze knife instead of keep using stone knives. Oh, and then we'll make a bronze hammer. All right, we've got our first 2 ingots about ready. This one is close enough. Melt at 950, so let's do just under 9. That's close enough. All right, so first we're going to want to make a bronze hammer. We need punch last and shrink not last. Okay, I need to go that way, that, and of course, it's perfect. There we go. It's well forged. So it's not great, but it's not bad. Well forged, you get the equivalent of efficiency 1 and unbreaking 1. And if you get poor forged, you could toss it right back into the forge, melt it down, and try again. Let's make an axe. And let's actually do it good this time. So we want upset 3rd to last, hit 2nd to last, and punch last. So we're going to want upset, hit, punch. Upset, hit, punch. Perfectly forged. How do you like that? So now we have a perfectly forged axe and our well forged bronze hammerhead. By the way, as I said, you use durability every time you click one of these on the hammerhead. So that's why we want a bronze one. It's going to have a lot more durability than a stone one. We could make black bronze. Black bronze has more durability than the tin alloy bronze, but you know, it's only 100 or so durability more. It's not insignificant, but it's not worth worrying about too much. Draw, hit. Okay, so we're gonna need to like go all the way over this way. Draw, hit. That was not far enough. Draw, hit. Ooh, I should have done a light hit. And now it's worked, and it's poorly worked. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap out. We're going to go back to the bronze rod here. Draw, bend. And it got cold. So what we're going to do now is this one will go here. This one will go up there. That's for the knife. We messed up. So we're going to let that melt. It's going to go back into an ingot mold and now pull out and put it back into the forge. And then we can try working it some more. Rods don't get the bonus of well forged and whatnot, so you don't have to worry about messing them up multiple times. So we're going to want to turn this into a meat hook. Bend not last, hit not last, punch last. Bend not last. And now we're going to do this. Not hot enough to work. They cool down faster. They heat up faster because they're less metal, but they also cool down faster because they're less metal. There we go. We want to make a fishing rod. Any, not last. Okay, so this makes it easy. Relatively. Boom, perfectly forged. There we go. Now we've got our knife. And pull that out. Let the forge cool down. We are almost out of charcoal, so I have to finish chopping enough wood to fill this up, and then we'll light that up. Now we have a hook. We can hang this from the ceiling somewhere. Maybe it has to be a proper ceiling and not just thatched ceiling, so we'll look at that in a minute. But then we can hang up our sheep. I forgot to mention something useful when forging. You can cool down ingots or any metal item quicker by sticking it in a barrel. This, of course, isn't useful if you're actually trying to forge an item, but let's say I'm working with zinc. Zinc has a melting temperature of 420 degrees. If I am casting zinc out into ingots, I'm using the forge, so the forge burns at 1300, which means after a while the temperature of the zinc in the ingot mold is going to be 1350, and you cannot pull the zinc out until it is under 420. So you can take the ingot mold with the molten zinc in it and put it into a barrel filled with water. You'd stick it in this slot here and it would slowly consume the water as it lowers the temperature. And we're talking about using up 1 millibucket per every few degrees. So it's not like you put one ingot in and your barrel's going to be empty. A full barrel will last you a decent amount of time. Okay, Butcher's Delight. Let's try this. I put a ash plank up. Yes, so you can attach the meat hook to a full block. The thatch doesn't count as a full block. A ash plank does. We can then pick up the carcass, left clicking to break it. And this tells me it still has 22 days. Hang dead animals on hooks from Butcher's Delight. Small animals, chickens and rabbits, ducks, quail, can be placed on the ground and cut with a knife. We want to do this, and then with a knife, there we go. We butchered the entirety of the sheep. That gave us some sheep rack, which is good for 11 days. Gave us some sheep legs, which is good for 11 days. Some raw mutton, good for 7 days. And sheep loin, which is good for 11 days. Each of these are something I can... Well, I'm going to need to cook, but when I eat them, they add to my overall health. Going to just toss them in here for now. I'll be making something with them very soon. We also have this fur of sheep, which I can scrape, like I was saying before, to get fur and a hide. So now we have a large raw hide and our wool. So let's grab the treated wood, grab the glue we made. We'll make our mixing bowl. All right, that's the mixing bowl. That is not everything. We need to make a spoon as well. Stick, lumber, knife. We do not want to use the treated lumber. That's a precious resource. That gives us a spoon. So now when we put the mixing bowl down, we can put the spoon in it. And when we have items in there, we click the spoon and it will stir. So now, with this raw hide, we need to seal it in a barrel of lime water to turn it into a soaked hide. Well, we happen to have a lot of lime water here, so we can just do that. That's going to take 8 hours. This wool I mentioned earlier, using the spindle. I can show you this again now that we actually have wool. Each time you do this, it consumes 1 durability from the spindle. Spindle has, I think, about 80 durability, or it might be 64. It's not a ton, but it's enough to get the job done. Let's move on to the last real part for today while we wait for the hides to soak, because I do need to show you something with the hides once it's done soaking. We're going to make a water wheel from Create and our first millstone. I'm going to need to go get another... Yeah, I don't have it. I'm going to need to go get some more raw stone to make the millstone. Oh, I can use hardened stone too. Oh, that's useful. But we need to first make the water wheel. The water wheel requires andesite alloy. That's going to require us using the forge again. We're almost out of charcoal, so you know what? I'm going to put that on hold. I'm going to cook myself a little more food. I'm going to go chop some trees, and then we'll get to making the create stuff. Okay, so we're just about full with our wood in here. I put that there. Put that there. Did not want to do that. And then dirt there. And now this is full of wood. Log piles is going to burn just like when I made the little pit, charcoal pit in the ground. Only now it's a 3x3, so we're going to get quite a bit more charcoal. Not a ton, but enough. So that's just going to run there. The soaked hide is done. We can pull it out. What we now do is we put it onto the log here. We grab our knife and we right click. And when we right click, you see it turned from pink to a pale flesh color. Well, I guess the pink's more of a flesh color. It turns a more lighter shade. We want to scrape off all the pink. It's 16 in total. And now it's a scraped hide. So now we can break it. And we have the scraped hide. The scraped hide we then soak in salt water. Do I have an empty barrel over here? No. Now we toss this in here, and this will become a prepared hide. Once it's a prepared hide, that's when we have to soak it in tannin. And then from there, we need to make some seed oil water. Seed oil water, we need to crush 5 seeds down into seed paste. Boil it in our pot with a bucket of water. And then we can use the mixing bowl to make the next, to mix it all together. So we place these in there, grind it down. Ooh, stovetop pot can only take 4. I don't know if this is going to work. We'll find out. Oh, we're getting 2 per instead of 1 per. No, that does not work. Okay. So, I believe our friend up here who is lost somewhere, yep, has a pot that I can steal. And there we go. Now it's boiling into the seed oil water, which we're going to need to toss in the mixing bowl. Oh, and I was looking through these, the rack of lamb and everything. Once we get a cutting board, we can chop it down and get a lot more meat out of it. So we are going to want to eat these individually after cooking them, of course, to get the hearts. But we're also going to want to chop them up to get more mutton. So our prepared hide is done. We take it out of here and we toss in with our tannin. And when it's done, we can then toss it in with our seed water oil we just made, turn it into an oiled hide, which we then scrape into large leather, like I said before. Our hide is done. We pull it out of there, toss it in there. We grab our barrel, our bucket of seed water, we add it in, and we click it once. It'll stir its own. You can take your hands off, you can walk away. I'm going to make a little bit of soup. Shift click to pull it out. Now it's a large oiled hide. Put that back on the log and scrape again, just like we did when we were making a scraped hide. And you can see the color difference as we go. Now we have large leather, which we can put into a sewing table to cut down. I don't have a sewing table yet. That'll be next episode. But now we have leather. Or at least what we need to make leather. I went and got some rhyolite, so we can now make ourselves a millstone. What we need to do is we need to make a gearbox. To make a gearbox, we need to make an andesite casing. We need to apply a small gear to an andesite casing. So we need to make andesite alloy. To make the andesite alloy, we're going to need andesite and zinc. Andesite cobble is less efficient than andesite loose rocks. That's useful to know. So 36 andesite and 8 zinc. Yes, that should be good. That'll allow us to make 4 andesite alloy. Alright, so while the andesite is cooking down, I need to make a small gear. A small gear is if I remember correctly, a slab on the chopping block. Yes. So that gives us what we need to make the gearbox. Almost. We need to make an andesite casing and a stripped log. We can grab... I have some logs right here. We'll need to make a water wheel. A water wheel requires a shaft and a large gear, and the large gear is made from a plank. There you go. We got andesite alloy. We need to heat this up. Andesite alloy melts at 930 degrees Celsius. So we got to heat this up a fair bit. There we go. Andesite alloy is done. And to show you what I meant about cooling stuff down, open this up, toss that in. Drained 28 millibuckets to finish cooling that down. You can toss this whole thing in, cools down pretty quick. Alright, so first andesite alloy goes onto the strip log, turns it into a casing. We then apply the small gear to the casing. It is now a gearbox. We then take one of our raw rhyolite or phyllorite, whichever one we have here, and we click the gearbox on to turn it into a millstone. Alright, to make a shaft, we need to put a support down, right click it with a andesite alloy, then we take the large gear, we click it on, and now it's a large gear, which we then wrap in lumber to turn into a water wheel. Boy, this is a little expensive because we need to do another one of those. We'll need another gearbox. Little shortcut here. I was going to make a slab using 4 planks, but what we could do instead is take the 1 plank, put it down, grab our chisel, grab our hammer, put the hammer in our offhand, and then the key bindings for this is middle click. It is middle click, but it's not doing it for me right now. Okay, I changed it to period. So now we can do that. Right click. We now have 2 planks, or 2 slabs. Toss that on. So now we have a water wheel, a millstone, and a shaft. And our gearbox. We can convert the gearbox to a vertical one. You know what? I don't think I needed the gearbox. The water in TerraFirmaCraft flows. I've mentioned this before. You can place the water wheel in the water and the flowing current of the water will turn the water wheel. We have a small gear here. We need to click a shaft onto the small gear, or click the small gear onto a shaft in order to turn it into a cogwheel. And my jug broke. Didn't I call it earlier today? So now the small water wheel is running in the water. It's not producing much power, but it's producing power. Now, I'm not going to do this permanently, but just to show you what we can do, we can attach the gearbox there, put the small cog there, and attach the millstone there. If we put a wooden hopper underneath this, or a wooden hopper, we could do a chute eventually. We don't have chutes yet, but now I can go grab. Okay, now that we actually have the correct version of tetrahedrite, go over here, drop it down, and the millstone will grind it for us instead of us needing to do it by hand at the quarn. Of course, we can speed up the Water wheel, same way you would with create anyway, going from a large wheel to a small wheel. There we go. We've got our dirty tetrahedrite dust from the millstone. This will produce dust. Not this dust, but the explodey kind of pollution dust. If that falls into the water will be polluted and turn yellow. You can fix that by placing a block in its spot or by getting a bucket, even a wooden bucket, getting water and then placing it over top. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build into the side of the mountain here, or the side of the cliff face. I'm going to build a mill. And I'm going to have a method for capturing dust. And unfortunately, I am running out of time for this episode, so that will be covered in next episode. But I will give you the basic idea. We're going to build a trench underneath the millstone there. We're going to put trapdoors underneath the millstone so that when the trapdoors produce dust, the dust will fall onto the trapdoors, falls through the trapdoors, and go down into a pit, a trench. And at the bottom, they will collect. Eventually, they will start to drop as items, which we can then pick up with either hoppers or by going down there and picking them up manually. And then we can use those for creative excavation, or what we could do is we can stick dirt down there and the dust will convert the dirt into path blocks, and then into gravel blocks, and then into coarse dirt blocks, and that's just another way of using up the dust. We've got millstone, we've got water wheel, we've got leather, we've got bees, and we forged a lot too. Yeah, I'd say it was actually rather productive. I also recorded a whole lot of footage, so I'm going to have a hard time editing again. Okay, well, this episode's getting a little long in the tooth, and before I outstay my welcome, I think it's time to end. Next episode, we'll cover create, we'll make the sewing table so we can actually get some leather, make the bellows, and figure out something else to do. Until then, thank you for joining me today. I hope you've had a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Later!